Hello and welcome to this very special edition of Channel 51 News. And the reason it is we are going to explore possibly one of the most difficult and most interesting stories that you will ever come across. And it is in real life, in real time, with real people. And we're going to explore MK Ultra as it was or even is in Australia. That's right, in Australia. Now, those who've been following me over the years know that I have interviewed Fiona Barnett many times, and she is possibly the most well-known of Australians who have suffered under MK Ultra and the PTSD that comes from it. That's just to touch and scratch the surface, but it goes a lot deeper and a lot further. And the purpose now is to explore others who are coming forward wanting to tell their stories. Now, in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to not one, but two people, Jo Gillies and McIntyre. We're going to hear their stories. But first, I'm going to show you how historically this has now been acknowledged in Australia, MK Ultra. This article from August 2021, written by Joey Watson, academic papers from the 1960s reveal how a CIA-funded mind control program came to Australia. In the article, he names, and it's very important, you're going to remember these names are going to come up a lot, Dr. Martin Orne. There you go, psychiatrist. There's one. Now, from the article, US intelligence concluded that the communists must be hypnotizing the soldiers. Alarmed, they decided that they needed to develop similar capabilities. This spurred the creation of MK Ultra. It was, says Mr. Kinzer, a project to find ways for the CIA to seize control of the minds of other people. Over 100 experimental projects were set up under MK Ultra. Projects' titles included phrases like aspects of magician's art useful in covert operations or sleep research and behavioral modification. Kinzer says that those working on MK Ultra experiments, often under extreme secrecy, would push ethical boundaries in the name of national security. Well, this name comes up as well in the article, Dr. Peter Sheehan. And I'll tell you what, our guests will be able to shed light on him. Also from the article, in another example, the CIA-funded experiments at a psychiatric hospital in Montreal, Canada, directed by the controversial Professor Donald Ewan Cameron. Many refer to him as Ewan. Professor Cameron's psychic driving involved subjecting drugged, sleep-deprived patients to continuously read audio messages on loop tape. Years later, a Senate hearing on MK Ultra concluded that some of these experiments represented a fundamental disregard for the value of human life. All right, getting that now all on the record. And of course, last week you would have seen probably the world's most famous MK Ultra victim in Kathy O'Brien was on this channel as well. We also had Dr. John Brady, forensic psychiatrist or psychologist, I should say, who confirmed that MK Ultra is in the science. It is all there. And he talked about mind control, even as much as linking up to Sirhan through a different type of approach, who was the man who was convicted of murdering RFK. So let's put all that together. Let me now introduce you to my two guests for this hour. Firstly, I'm going to tell you about Jo Gillies. After her intelligence agency father died in a plane crash in the early 60s, Jo immigrated to Nassau, Bahamas with her mother and brother at around age 4. Nassau was not as idyllic as everyone thinks, especially when you're targeted as an individual. She's not only a survivor of severe MK SRA, that's satanic or ritual abuse trauma, but has come to heal and is still healing from it all. Remembering earlier memories of sexual predatory abuse at the hands of the church minister and Sunday school cult satanic abuse rituals, she's unraveled many more memories over the past few years from those dark times in the Bahamas. One of them is MK Ultra experimentation and cult voodoo trauma-based mind control. Researching and exposing the darker lies of this planet as humans call home has helped her to understand and frame why MK Ultra and SRA exists. Understanding the impact of severe trauma on the mind-body-spirit connection within us has led to a myriad of healing journeys to rise above and thrive. They're Jo's words. Now, Doug McIntyre was born into a cult family at St George Hospital in Cogra, New South Wales in the early 1960s. At this time, St George Hospital was connected to the Sydney University and was working with Martin Orne from the CIA, Doug's words, and conducting their MK Ultra experiments in Cogra. He was one of the children subject to those horrific experiments of trauma-based mind control, especially how to make colour TV, which was to come out later in 1975, more mind controllable for the masses. Just scratching the surface. Let me bring in both of my guests right now. Here they come, Jo and Doug. Welcome, and thanks for joining me today on Channel 51.
Thank you.
Nice to be here, Jason.
Well, lady and gent, reading those bios, and I've only just sort of summarized and scratched the surface, to look at you and to see two normal human beings compared to what we saw there is alone. It's almost shocking just the same. You look like normal people. But what you've been subjected to is anything that nobody could even accept. How then can you mingle in the world in real time and tell this story and not the shutters to go down when you meet people in real life, Jo?
Well, look, it seems so fantastical to the average person. I mean, when I started uncovering the memories, which became very strong, even to myself, I'm going, did that really happen? But, and that also led down a rabbit hole of what the police did was to deny any of this stuff had happened, and they called it false witness syndrome. And that's when I realized, they're really trying to cover this up. And so when the memories come out, you have to actually face the memories in order to reframe them and heal them, because otherwise they say trapped in your body. Because there's a book that both Doug and myself have read, The Body Keeps Score. And it's a brilliant book, and it literally talks about the impact of trauma on the body. And so the body's very clever at bringing it up. And I always know when a memory's about to come because something comes up in my body and I'm like, oh, God, here we go again. So, I suppose, Doug, it's like our vocation has kept us completely sane. It's kept us with a purpose, with a goal. Because I have a passion for architecture and I love it, and it's literally been my kind of saving grace. But I think, if you've got people out there sharing this stuff, and what it's done for me is I'm now able to see who in our politicians, who in our people who are, based respectable people in society are disassociating. And I literally every second person, and there'd be a lot of people I went to university with, and I look at them now and they're just, you can see the look. We call it the disassociative look. And they have no idea that this stuff has happened to them. They live their life on autopilot, and they have their traumas, and they have their carefully constructed cages of total distrust to anybody. A lot of them become very high level, high functioning narcissists, and they literally cause absolute hell for those who live around them, very close to them. So, when you're an empathic person and you come out of this stuff, you actually, you start to unpack it. And I think unpacking it, but you have to unpack it and you've got to feel it. There's been the stuff that I endured in the Bahamas, for example. One of the first gruesome memories came back while I was in India, and I was doing a Buddhist pilgrimage, and I climbed up to the Buddhist, where, the Buddha was meant to have downloaded all his amazing wisdom. And they were chanting and I was chanting, and chanting gets you into, it can actually help to bring on release or relief from, blockages of memories. And the memory was, and, I hope the listeners are okay with this, but in the Bahamas, there was a lot of stray dogs on the island, and a lot of, hens and chickens that used to just run around. And so they didn't really like the dogs, and they would literally string them up in Sunday school, and they would torture them and slowly, and then they would behead them in front of us. And we were a small group of kindergarten kids, but that was not just the expat kids, it was also the local kids as well. So that memory, and it's really interesting because now if anyone tries to hurt an animal or a dog in front of me, it's like this super power comes out and I just want to take them out. You just crossed a line, don't do that. But also too, one of the programs that I was programmed with was stating savior complex, the savior programming. I have to save everybody. And that was really hard to break. And a lot of that came back in. So there's an island close by. It's actually a very well-known island within the Bahamas. It's called Andros Island. And it's a deep underground military submarine base where they used to do a lot of experimentation, and it's right in Atlantis. And, you know, there's other stories of other survivors who corroborated this place as well. So not just me. And, you know, I was taken there a lot. There's tunnel systems underneath there and the channels. There's ancient technology there. You know, there was, you know, facilities there that will probably make the average person's toes curl or make a horror movie look tame. So, but I have kind of, I don't know if I've actually answered your question or not, but I thought perhaps maybe if Doug, you know, jumps in, then I can jump in after.
Well, thanks, Jo. And that was just incredible, just the same time, to be able to explain, because there is a flushing I can feel of this information that's coming forward. And what I'm trying to do is for our audience is to try and map out a narrative that's explainable and understandable, because there is just so much information. So, Doug, technically, if we go back to the beginning, what I was trying to do was to work out your bio versus your appearance don't match. You look like normal, beautiful people living a normal, beautiful life, and your background is anything but. How do you match in society? How do you fit in, and how do you introduce yourself and your story to the wider community? Because you can't live in a box and in a shadow and in denial. So how do you do it?
Well, it's been very difficult, Jason. So I've had a lot of issues with society. Like Jo, you know, I went into architecture because, you know, I'm dealing with people's dreams, basically, so I can live in my head, in my imagination, which is safe. I've had a life where it's very difficult to be in my body. So going through puberty was absolutely horrendous for me. I became selective autistic for about 9 months, where I couldn't talk because I felt like I was turning into a perpetrator. So I had blocked a lot of my sexual abuse till about my mid-20s, but I'd always remembered a lot of the violence. The violence was off the charts. And I always had massive issue with groups, because normally when I was the center of attention of a group as a child, you know, someone was sacrificed or something like that happened, you know, bad things happened. So for me, even walking across a pedestrian crossing, I'd have anxiety attacks. I could cover it, but it was difficult. You know, for a period I went to church, much to my parents' disgust and horror, my whole body would start almost convulsing. Same if when I was on a bus or public transport, you know, my body wouldn't cope. And in my early 20s, because I put myself through uni, you know, I remember screaming at myself, what's wrong with me? Because I felt I was dragging this ball and chain of emotion around every day, but it had been blocked out. In fact, you know, they tried to wipe my memories of some of the things they'd done to me. And when my daughter was born, when I was 30, because I got married, had 2 kids, and I was very good one-on-one with people, but any more than that, it was too much. And, you know, life has been uncovering why I've had the neuroses and psychoses and all the other things I've had. So I'm probably more normal now than I've ever been, if I can put it that way. But yeah, when my daughter was born, I was overwhelmed with sensations of death and thinking she was going to die. And, you know, my children to me was, you know, because my family was so horrific, were like a, you know, salvation to me. You know, they were my first normal family. But, you know, when Ellie was born, all of a sudden I started getting flashbacks of my father holding my hand on a knife while a little girl the same age as me, we were both 3, was being sacrificed. And so then, you know, that was horrific when that came out. And for about 3 months, I felt like I was going totally insane. I went to a group of survivors of child abuse, ASCA. Liz Mulliner, I think, ran it at the time, who was a major casting agent in Sydney, and she was really good. But a woman came up to me at that meeting and said, you know, did I have dissociative identity disorder? And I said, what's that? And as she explained it to me, I ran from the room virtually screaming, ran to the bathroom, almost passed out, almost threw up, almost shit myself, everything at once, shaking uncontrollably, sweating, and that was the first time that someone had actually started to connect the dots. As I said, for the next 3 to 6 months, I was very touch and go. I felt like I was hanging by a thread. I found a therapist who could help me with, as Joe's mentioned, disassociation. And over the next 10 years, I was able to slowly work through my dissociative states and start to bring some cohesion back and start to integrate the parts of myself that had been fragmented through the trauma. Now I can go back into the memories where they purposely, intentionally, and willfully fragmented me, where I was brutally raped with rods, with men, with all sorts of things, suffocated, all the MK Ultra stuff, where they learn all about trauma-based mind control. And if we think of TV and media and everything these days, most people now see something like 10,000 murders, and our bodies don't recognize what's real and what's not. And so this is part of the program of traumatizing us without us, under the guise of entertainment, in a sense. So that was sort of the beginning of my journey. But it's been I know for me, and Jo will answer for herself, but for me, my trauma has been so severe, I have to deal with it, because if I don't deal with it, I go under. It's not like I can put things off. So I normally have stages where I'll go through an intensive few years of dealing with things, and then I'll have a break, and then more years. And I do a whole range of modalities. Both of us have explored psychedelics quite successfully. So that's sort of in a nutshell how things started for me.
If you would like to watch the entire interview with Jo Gillies and Doug McIntyre, please go over to channel51.com.au and become a paid subscriber, either for a year at $51 this month or for just